It's 8-6.
Does it vary every time?
Yeah, it does.
Okay.
It's 868-233-11811.
Oh, yeah. So, Sharon's wisdom on that. Oh, that's good. Yeah. How are you guys? Good, how are you? Good. Smarta. You guys get a packet? Just find that. We know how to treat you. What'd you get? Mustard? Yellow mustard, I think. We do better than that. When you turn your computer on, does it take a minute for it to recognize your mouse? Is there a wobbler?
I'm here. I did not get a packet, but I've spoken with June and hopefully we will have that mailed out in time next time.
Yeah, I know she put it in the mail, but we'll work on getting that to you. Hopefully before.
It's more helpful that way.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. So we're just waiting for one more and then we can start. Hopefully it'll be one of the chair, vice chair. Did we? Oh wait, Marta's not here.
She's in. You want to give it?
No, I think we're good. I just wanted to make sure we're gonna have the chair, the vice chair here.
Yeah, I heard that Jeff is going to be here.
That's right. Okay, all right. We'll wait for Trevor.
Are we unable to discuss any agenda items before they get here? I just have a question that's not about the agenda item per se. Well, it's about it, but let me just ask it and then you can tell me. We'll have to wait.
Sure, that sounds
okay.
good.
I had never previously heard of the Gateway Estate project. And so since this is phase 2-22, I was just wondering if someone could enlighten me as to when, I guess, phase 1, or when did it actually originally come forward?
Why don't we discuss that with everyone?
Okay.
So everyone's aware of that one.
It's a good question, though.
It is. Do you have any other questions?
Oh, I have lots of questions about various agenda items, but I figured they'll be for the meeting.
On the agenda items, I had a few things I was going to update you guys on, but it'd probably be good to have everyone here. So but
Is everyone coming?
I know Jeff Burton is not, but I don't think I've heard from anyone else that they're not. So hopefully we'll have a full house. Oh,
Oh, what?
What is it?
Did you get a veggie? Did you want a veggie?
You gotta eat
You
it
gotta
now,
do something about this, man.
bro. You gotta eat it.
Can I be the one that orders food?
Here, give me the veggie. What do you want?
No,
I'm good.
no, it's good for me.
You want ham?
Janet gets to watch me eat it. No, I'm okay. I touched it already. I'm good. Thank you.
I'll live.
No. It's good for me.
She's not Janet, she's Commissioner
Oh,
Wampler.
sorry. Officially started yet, so.
Good, Commissioner, how are you?
Now I do want to wait till the camera gets in front of me anymore. Maybe I'll do this. No,
Awkward.
I'm just gonna
But
go.
you're providing comedic relief to Commissioner Walker.
I promise to judge you on all matters of manners and etiquette.
Yeah. I need that.
How are things in Florida?
Oh, we had a respite from the heat for a little while, which was very nice. But it's back to hot.
Sure.
Dang it.
Maybe it's morning.
That's the problem with the back from Charlie and Felix. There should be room, but I just need to know what time we're leaving. You know? I'll see. For sure. Like your veggie.
Wherever.
Yeah.
The decision type when we get to, I can't remember if I talked to you on the phone about this, but it's my number legislative. Portland's gonna explain how everything is 0, 0. Meeting the requirements. There was an article in the paper that said something about Newtown even not being approved.
So that you're saying that's when you want Cortland to explain how it was legal to not have a public hearing for Newtown.
Well, there was a public hearing through
On
the
Old
county
Town.
commission.
Oh, right, yes, that's
Yes,
right.
there was definitely. a
But
public
not
hearing.
with the planning commission.
Correct, and
Yeah.
and he'll explain why. because-
Yeah,
And the reasoning, so, yeah.
great.
And then there's some dates that are gonna be changing on certain meetings. That I'd like to go with you guys, sure, we can do that now, or we can do it under director's comments, whatever you prefer.
So when Cortland's gonna explain, is he gonna explain the legality of it or how it's out of the process, the whole?
He'll explain how it is meeting the process,
Meaning the process or the legality?
how it's meeting the legal ordinance and the requirements.
The normal process would have been that it would have gone individually, right?
Not necessarily. There's different ways it can go through, and the way it went through met our land use ordinance. So,
Still slightly out of process, right?
I wouldn't
Because I
say,
remember it
I
being.
wouldn't say out of process, but out of how it's typically, how you have seen it typically done.
Yeah.
But there's other ways that it can occur and still meet the ordinance. So, what was your exact question, Chair?
But when that Newtown was done, I remember how that went down. And I mean, I'm sure I could find information, but it was basically, I felt that we had only talked about Old Town, but yet the county commission approved it, which is in their rights to do it legal, no problem. And we more than likely would have approved the Newtown as well, but it was outside of the process normally, meaning that like we forwarded a recommendation of approval for Old Town and then staff took Newtown with Old Town and said, yeah, the planning commission approves this, which is somewhat outside of process or standard that we would normally do.
Okay.
Right, that's what my point is. Yeah, it's legal, it's fine, just not
Okay.
kind of. So the public saw a public hearing on one thing in one area and didn't have a concern. And then when it came to the public hearing commission, it's totally different.
Okay.
Which is a little different, right?
Yeah.
Is that not what happened? Is that what I heard?
Yeah, and that's within their purview to do that.
Yeah.
But they chose to add in addition to the ordinance, which was that.
And, yeah, I mean, they could do it.
Yeah.
I'm just acknowledging the fact that the community has the right to be upset about it because it is different.
Yeah, I think there's a
That's all
difference
I-
between can do and should do.
Yeah, and that's what the commission chose to do.
They
And
should have,
that's-
I wasn't part of this at that time, but they should have been explicit and explained. Because it's my understanding that the members of this commission at that time weren't even aware that happened or.
We can get into that in the meeting, but
I don't know.
what they should, what you think they should have done is your opinion.
Right.
But the legislative body is the one who makes the
Right.
decision. So,
But they do it on behalf of the community. And I think they should always act in a upfront way, and when they don't, for some reason, then there should be an explanation. And again, it's should versus could.
Yeah.
Do we have a quorum for?
Or the north side ambulances for him, we're supposed to be coming, bringing these in.
We have a quorum. And it's.
Oh, yeah. Let's go ahead. I mean, we're
I just want to make the comment that when planning staff is having, although I see that you guys are trying to have hushed conversation, but nobody can understand the other conversation that's happening with the planning commission and with Director Grover, it all becomes mush. So if we could just.
You weren't able to hear any of that?
I got a lot of mush. There were some side conversations happening closer to the mic.
Okay, what Cortland's gonna do is before the legislative item, he's going to explain how it met the land use ordinance process. Because there was some information in the paper that said otherwise. And Cortland will explain that.
Okay,
So that's all that was.
thank you.
Chair, if you don't mind, I'm gonna maybe just explain a few dates that are gonna be changing.
Yeah.
So, as you know, we've changed the planning commission meeting from the 28th to the 14th for the Ogden Valley Planning Commission. And that was due to the election being changed from the 7th to the 21st. And so Western Weaver was gracious enough to push their meeting to the 7th, so you could have your meeting on the 14th, so it doesn't conflict with Thanksgiving. And then the county commission has been gracious enough to change the hearing date on the 31st for the Newtown Eden Amendment and Old Town Eden Amendment to December 5th. And they're gonna do that at a night meeting at 5 o'clock, which they usually never do, but they have on this item. And so it's requiring a lot of changes in their schedule to accommodate that, but it will be here on December 5th. And we've changed the state notice site for that. So just wanted you guys to be aware of that. And then, but with that, because of the change to December 5th, that will take your work session. You won't have a work session in December because that was your night for the work session. So you'll just have one meeting in December. So perfect. So just FYI, that's all I have.
And the date of our December meeting is?
Let me pull it up.
Sorry, but the December 5th meeting will be canceled.
Correct.
Okay.
Your meeting will be on December 19th.
Thank you.
Yep. Yeah, we didn't want to have your regular meeting, which would have been on December 26th. So we moved it to the third Tuesday of the month, which is December 19th.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this
Okay. We want to discuss some specific points.
What do you want to spend a little more time on in the work session?
I think Janet had a question about one of the items, a preamble question.
Yeah, Jen,
Okay. Well, I had a lot of questions regarding a couple of the items. I guess the first item we can discuss was the Lakeview Haven. In reviewing it, so we're talking about a currently existing single-family home, and we're looking to just simply redesignate the same home. Is there any additional construction happening?
No.
Or are we just taking it from a personal property to a commercial property?
That is correct.
Okay. And then I'm going to have some questions regarding the sewage, like septic versus, obviously there's no sewer there, but sewage and the runoff. So I'm not sure we can discuss it in the meeting or now, or.
So I guess what specifically is your question, Commissioner?
Well, it just seemed like taking it from a part-time single-family residence to a year-round recreation center that ideally is filled to capacity as often as possible will definitely increase the amount of sewage output. And the packet mentioned that it is directly across from the swim area of Pineview. So I guess I'd want to know a little bit more about how that works in terms of runoff.
So first I want to address your question about a part-time single-family residence. I'm not aware that the health department differentiates that when it comes to septic systems between full-time and part-time residential.
No, right,
now,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So now they may with commercial, I know if you're looking at there is a certain threshold that can be crossed where they would then require something much more robust. From my understanding, the applicant is working with the health department to make sure that either an expansion of the existing septic system is in place or an upgrade to be able to accommodate the existing structure. The health department, from what I'm aware of, looks at bedroom count. They don't even look at bathroom count. They're looking at bedroom count, and they're unsure if the existing septic system was sized to accommodate the number of bedrooms there, even though it's the original residence. So the applicant is working very closely with them to make sure that whatever septic system is in place meets all of the Weaver Morgan Health Department's requirements.
Okay.
Yeah, and on that, being a conditional use permit, we can just put it approval subject to those approvals as well as they look into it.
Yes, thank you. That's something I'm interested in.
and it's already ordinance, so we would look into that, but you can add that as a condition to ensure that.
Wonderful. And then separately, I had the majority of my questions were with regard to our legislative item. I don't know if anybody had anything before that one.
Yeah, another question.
Did you have a question about Gateway Estates, Commissioner?
Oh, I did. It was not regarding its approval of this agenda item. It was more, when did that first come into play? I've never heard of Gateway Estates before, but it looks like this is phase 2.
Okay, so Gateway Estates phase 1 came before the Planning Commission in 2021. Okay. The preliminary approval expired. And so they resubmitted their fees, and they resubmitted a new plan for phase 1, which originally had 10 lots in it. And they broke it up because 9 lots or less, those administrative approvals can be done by the planning director. And so phases 1A through 1D were approved administratively by Director Grover back on October 4th of this year.
Okay.
Those are separate from these phases 2 through 22. These are separate applications. And so they're looking for preliminary approval for their phases 2 through 22.
Okay. And how many lots were in phase 1A through D?
10 total.
10 total. And then what we're looking at with phase 2 are how many lots? I saw the 400 acres.
21 lots, so each phase consists of 1 lot.
Okay, 1 lot per, okay. Thank you.
Okay, do we want to go over some questions on the legislation?
I don't want to cut anybody off, but I don't hear anybody. Is anybody speaking?
Go ahead, Janet.
Okay. Yeah, so I have a few concerns that I'm sure we'll get into during the discussion, but let's see. Some of them are just more about maybe possibly differences of perspective on the general plan with regard to when something is in a zone, not a zone, in a village or not. So I have some questions and thoughts about that. But specifically, there was a mention in the packet. I'm trying to remember the page. It says page 3 of 7. I'm trying to figure out the actual page of the packet. But if we go to that item, page 3 of 7, there was a discussion in the packet about bonus density and being used sparingly. My recollection of our general plan states specifically no bonus density, so I wasn't sure that you pulled that from our general plan and you didn't cite the page like you did earlier.
It's on page 15.
Page of the general plan or of this packet?
Of the general plan.
Page 15, it talks about allowing bonus density?
Correct. I omitted the reference on the staff report, but I've got it in the presentation for tonight.
Okay. I didn't recall that. Okay.
Yeah, it's that.
Yeah. Okay. And then I guess we're going to be discussing later with Cortland, but I had some questions, obviously, bringing up the idea about the street regulating map being used as evidence supporting something when there was discussion about whether or not the street regulating map had actually been legally adopted. So I guess that will come up as well with Cortland. Okay, so that'll be answered there. I had a couple questions about the size requirement that was listed on the street regulating map when that was brought up in the packet versus what is required when we went into the other potential options like the flag lot and et cetera. Whether or not there was, it was very small print on my computer, but it looked like the street regulating map said that that road requires the size of the ground to be, I forget what it is, if it was 40,000 or it was something, some number. And I just wanted to double check that that still coincides with the various options that was laid out.
That is correct. You're absolutely right.
Okay. And I understand that we are discussing a rezone and not a subdivision, but I'm unsure whether or not it comes into play when all of a sudden we have things like they were not approved or there was some difficulty in getting approval for any kind of a septic system. Existing sewer doesn't exist. Should this not wait until they have an avenue to be able to act on this?
It's a fair question.
That's is definitely a fair question, but on our application, that's not a requirement for a rezone to be considered. What is considered is if they are inside a boundary of a sewer district area, they just have to be noticed, but they don't have to have any type of an approval for a rezone.
Okay.
That's done all at the subdivision. Those details are taken care of at the subdivision level.
Right. Also, I wanted to be reminded when I know that there are different rules for a commercial form-based and a residential form-based, but when it comes to overnight rentals, I'm under the impression that a residential form-based does not automatically get overnight rentals. Is that correct?
That's my understanding as well. I'm looking it up right now to make sure, but yeah, that for rural residential, it doesn't allow, the residential portion of the form-based code does not allow for short-term rentals it's the higher density, the mixed use, residential and that kind of thing that allows for short-term rentals.
I think you're right on that, Bill, but if you look that
I'm looking it up right now.
Right. So that would make this, if he was going to develop, then this would make it a single family sale rather than in any kind of short-term rental, ADU, anything like that. Is that correct?
Yellow.
That's right.
Any short-term, but I mean, I don't know what could change. Yeah.
And then actually that reminded me, Tammy, I was going to ask that same question about the area for the recreation lodge. Is that area allowed short-term rentals currently, or would the switch to commercial create that for them?
A recreation lodge is a permitted use in that zone with a conditional use permit. And the definition of a recreation lodge includes nightly rentals.
Okay.
So yeah, I just looked it up, and according to section 104.22 3 point whatever, it's not allowed. It's not a permitted use.
Okay, thank you.
So one thing I noticed, and I'll bring it here, is that in the past, we had discussed that legislative item, it seemed inappropriate to have staff recommend one way or the other for a legislative item. But I see that we are recommending a positive recommendation for this. Have we made it, are we doing that now?
So on that,
and that's why we started adding these model motions.
Yeah. We put the model motions in there, but on this one, we felt that it was more appropriate to give a recommendation on this one from the staff side of things, but we gave those model motions for you to consider on this one.
So you don't have to take staff's recommendation, obviously. Yeah.
So I think the problem was, and the problem was that the community felt that we had advocates for one way or the other at the county level, and that there was distrust building up, meaning that we felt like the community's not being heard, and that the staff is not hearing the community, they're hearing the developer and advocating for it, and we're putting it on paper. And that was the concern that I heard as a planning commissioner. And my concern was, well, let's not do that then. And so that's what we had discussed.
Yeah, we had discussed that. And this one, where it was fairly, I wouldn't say cut and dry, but it was more obvious, that's why we gave a recommendation. But you're right, typically you've asked us not to do that, but on this one,
I mean, you guys, I'm just curious. So, yeah.
On some level, I feel like staff has some obligation, an ethical obligation to promote good planning. And if something is in line with good planning, that conversation could be had.
That's a great point. You guys are well trained, and this is what you do all day long. Yeah. Right. So it's very valuable information. The problem that I see, that I don't know that you're seeing, is that I don't know that you as staff are living in the area and know the subjective details that are legislative decisions. And so your viewpoint, while it's very important, and the facts are very important, for example, knowing that something that says like staff sees these, wants to point out these points, right, that it meets these codes, is very valuable. Making a statement of a point of opinion about a legislative item that is subjective to public opinion, correct?
Yes.
Can be viewed that you're advocating for a development or a developer. Yeah. And that causes distrust between community and the county. And that's what my concern is that, if we're trying to show that we're doing the right thing, but we're not trying to do our part in the small ways, it makes it difficult. Yeah.
It kind of makes it hard. I know you've requested that, but there's kind of an ethical duty that planners have to give those recommendations. And so I pulled back on the larger ones to do that, but on these smaller ones that are not as critical, I don't know, I feel kind of obligated for their ethical responsibility to show that. But, and still, we want to be respectful of what you guys do request on those type of things. And so, you know, on more controversial ones, yeah, we'll give a recommendation, but on this one, we didn't.
Can I mention, if I could jump in really quickly, there's 2 points I'd want to bring up. And one is that I imagine that, I mean, when I read these packets, the way that you all write them, which is very professional, I will add, that, you know, here's what the applicant is asking for. Here are the requirements needed for this to be approved. And here's how they meet those requirements. So I'm already reading a packet where I read into it that you are saying, this works. This meets the requirements, this meets the ordinances. And so I wouldn't think that you would bring it forward towards us without revising things that don't work or are not good planning. So if it's in the packet, I'm already under that impression. The other item I'd want to bring up is that during the convention that I attended, when was it, in September, one of the things mentioned to the planning commissioners in a planning commission meeting or conference seminar was the fact that they've done studies that show that he who speaks first on whether they want to approve or deny has a tendency to sway the discussion and the vote. So in that respect, if you take that kind of found research analysis and put it towards, while reading this initial packet, we're already reading that staff urges to approve, that then leads a discussion on one path rather than having it stay open.
Thank you. We will move into the other room. We're a little late, so sorry about that.
Hi, Commissioner Walker. We'll see you over there.
Let me take the same.
Hey, Rick, hopefully you're not too upset. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to call the meeting of the Ogden Valley Planning Commission meeting to order. The audience, please rise and join the pledge of allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Let the record indicate that Commissioner Barber, Commissioner Foreman, Commissioner Montgomery, and Commissioner Wampler in attendance.
Commissioners, we're considering approval of the minutes dated August 1st, 2023. There have not been any submitted corrections. Are there any corrections to note at this time? If not, we'll move to submit or to move to approve as submitted. Do any planning commissioners have any conflicts of interest or ex parte communications to declare for any items on the agenda? We have a couple of items, administrative items on the agenda for legislative item tonight. Go ahead and move right into the administrative items. 2.1 CP 2022-6. Director Grover, would you please explain the decision type and presenting?
Yes, thank you. This is an administrative item, and as an administrative item, there are certain land use laws that are required to be met. If they are meeting those, you're obligated to approve this item. Ms. Aydelotte's going to be presenting this item, and as she does, she'll be explaining how it is meeting land use code or it is not, and then you'll need to make a decision. You're not required to open it up to public comment, but you can if you'd like to.
You ready? Okay. Good evening. This is a request for approval of a recreation lodge. This is located in the Forest Valley 3 zone at approximately 5597 East, Highway 39. As you can see, can everyone see this okay? This is located south of Pineview on the south side of Highway 39. This is located on 14.85 acres. It is up an access road that comes off of Highway 39 here. This is an existing 6-bedroom residence. It's been here since 1981. A recreation lodge is a permitted use in the Forest Valley 3 zone with a conditional use permit. And so that is the request at this time. Some things that I want to kind of draw your attention to their site plan that they've outlined. A recreation lodge, excuse me, part of some of the requirements of designating something as a recreational lodge includes some on-site amenities, typically year-round. Applicant is proposing winter amenities, summer amenities, as outlined in the packet. You'll see that in their narrative as well as on their site plan. This is what we just went over. These are some of their proposed uses: snowshoeing, cross-country skiing, hiking, pickleball. Some things that we look at and we take into consideration when we're looking at conditional uses, and we do this with most all of our applications, but especially with conditional uses, prior to a conditional use permit being issued, and oftentimes a business license that accompanies that, we are looking for boxes to be checked from all of the review agencies. Weber Fire is one of them. This particular home is located off of a substandard access road. Weber Fire has concerns with not only the width, but the condition of this road. Now, they have worked with the applicant to outline a few things that they can accept for this season so that the applicant can be up and running for the winter if he would so choose. And I'm going to draw your attention back here to the site plan. Let me see if I can get onto a map. Hold on just a moment. Give you a better view of this. Okay, I'm going to zoom out a little bit. This is the property where this is located. I'm not sure how familiar you are with this area. You've got an access that comes off of Highway 39. It does kind of sneak up on you a little bit. And you've got to come all the way up here. There is an easement recorded with this access, but this access currently accesses 5 to 6 homes at the moment. Typically, a 5th residence would trigger the need to increase the standard of the roadway because you're looking at an additional impact. Both engineering and Weber Fire have got some requirements in place right now. One of these, there are 3 things that Weber Fire District will require in order for Mr. Campanero to be up and running this winter, at least from their reviews. One of them is a turnout about halfway up the road. They would like to see a turnout on this roadway here. They would also like to see a hammerhead on the applicant's driveway, which he's already got someone ready to start excavating to be able to do that. And they're requiring a sprinkler system be installed in the home. And the applicant is again ready to do that pending his approval. So those are the 3 requirements from Weber Fire District that they would like to see. What they would like to see by about this time next year is to have the entire roadway widened to 20 feet of travel surface. The width of this road is inconsistent coming all the way up. The applicant has done a little bit of work on the road, and they've taken to plowing it, maintaining it as best they can at the moment. But Weber Fire District, prior to them operating a second winter, they would want to see the roadway all the way up to the applicant's driveway brought up to a minimum fire standard. County engineering has the same concerns, and so they would like to see that width as well, 20 feet. So that we've got in our staff report that we would recommend approval. We feel this meets code, subject to all review agency requirements. Weber Morgan Health Department, they have reviewed this. They've indicated there are a few things that Weber Morgan Health Department looks at, not just the septic system, not just necessarily the well capacity, but they also look at, one of the things they look at is they look at the number of guests that will be in there and what exactly the use will be. There were discussions about potentially having to have a commercial kitchen in there, but upon discussion with the applicant, realizing that these are much smaller events than what they had anticipated, the existing kitchen facilities will work. The only thing that they have to work with health department at this time is to just ensure that the septic system is up to par for 16 guests, up to 16 guests. Let me go back to this presentation here. Another thing that we look at with conditional use is what will be the impact to the neighbors. This is a home that is tucked pretty far off of the road. They're looking to maintain as much of the existing vegetation as possible, and there are quite a few trees on these almost 15 acres. The only thing they've done landscaping wise, besides clearing areas for parking, which they will be required to hard surface by this time next year, is they've just been clearing some dead wood out of the trees, which hasn't been done from my understanding in quite some time. So that's pretty much all planning has at this time. The applicant is here to answer any questions. I'm happy to answer any questions. Staff feels that they've met the requirements. When we look at parking, I do want to mention parking actually. We have parking standards for many uses. We don't have any parking standards outlined for a recreation lodge. And so what staff did was we looked at some of the parking regulations to try and find which would fit closest to this proposed use. And one of them is a bed and breakfast inn. The only difference is with a bed and breakfast inn, the owners or the hosts are required to live on site. This does not have that requirement. And so the requirement from staff at this time and the Planning Commission is certainly, if you'd like to amend that, you're welcome to. We are requiring 1 parking space per sleeping room. So minimum of 6 parking spaces on site that will need to be hard surfaced.
Quick question for you, Tammy.
Yes.
As far as how do you enforce the road widening and the improvements to the road after the conditional use permit has been issued?
So in this every particular case is a little bit different, but they do have to apply for a business license. They actually have to get the conditional use permit. So it usually involves inspections from either planning, engineering, fire. We wait to get everyone sign off before we issue the actual conditional use permit. In a case like this, where the applicant is requesting a little more time to finish getting those road improvements in, because as you know, this time of year, you can't get anyone to come up there and put down any road base or pour in concrete. And even though we have June 24th as a date in here, we also know that given this last year, they may not be able to get it done by that time. And so I think the applicant's hoping to have until this time next year. The way we would enforce it is we would go out and do an inspection this time next year. And if it's not in, then the conditional use permit is revoked as well as the business license until everything meets the rest of those requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
The way a conditional use is revoked is we bring it back to you and you can revoke that.
I had a question about the parking. You were mentioning that you based it off of the bed and breakfast, but then I think you adjusted it. So is the bed and breakfast one per bedroom plus 1 for the host?
Plus 2 for the hosts. Yes.
Two for the host. Okay. And I understand because the host isn't required to stay on site. But we might speculate that if they have any questions about something, whether maybe something in the kitchen isn't working or something like that, the host or another visitor might come to help them. So maybe just considering putting back in an extra spot or two, since we're making this from scratch. Is that correct?
Correct. I will say that the applicant is proposing 10 to 12 parking spots, even though our minimum is 6, but Planning Commission can certainly adjust those parking requirements.
But are we setting a precedent since there is no written ordinance for parking for recreational lodges?
Cortland, what are your thoughts on setting a precedent?
With respect to parking requirements?
Yeah, specifically for a recreation lodge where we don't have them outlined in our land use code.
I noticed that in the staff report. I would not be concerned that we are setting a legal precedent. It makes sense to treat different applications the same way, though.
Because I appreciate that this applicant is going above and beyond with parking. I worry that if we don't require a little bit extra, that we have somebody down the road that does not.
And I think if you had specific requirements and reasons why this site is different than somewhere else, you could easily require more parking. You just need to make that part of your motion for this specific site. Because conditional uses are handled on a site-by-site basis, and the conditional use runs with that land. It doesn't run with another piece of property.
Is this, so I assume the road is a private road?
It is.
And the who's responsible, for example, for snow removal? Is there an association? I guess that's my question. Are there CC&Rs? Is there an association?
This is not a dedicated private road. There is an access easement, and someone many years ago put down some road base over this easement. So it's used by everyone who benefits off of that, which are 5 homes and currently 7 to 8 lots. Mr. Campanero could probably speak in a little more detail about who maintains it, but my understanding is most of the homeowners kind of chip in to maintain that road to at least get the snow off of there so they can safely come and go.
Are there CC&Rs or private covenants that exist on that lot or the group of lots that access that road?
No.
Okay. Any questions? With that, take a motion.
I'll make a motion. I move that we approve Highway 39 in Huntsville, based on the findings of the staff report and the condition on the local and state requirements.
May I request a friendly amendment?
Sure.
I didn't hear all of but if you basically did a conditional of approval, I think I heard that it's just based on the staff report and with the approvals from the various departments. My amendment would be to adjust the parking to put back in 1 per bedroom plus 2 as a minimum. And then separately, I guess I missed my opportunity, but I was interested in adding a condition for an enhanced treatment on-site unit that was recommended by the Utah Geological Survey Study 165. And the reason for this being that in one of our recent meetings, the joint session with the county commissioners, they stressed vehemently the nitrate problem. And I would think, I know that they're working with the health department, but an extra unit would counter that problem.
Commissioner, with respect, I think he's going above and beyond on his parking already. And then the health department's going to regulate their septic system and make sure it's operable. And so I respectfully decline your amendment, please.
Okay. He's going above and beyond, but is his number in the approval, or is it the 6 minimum?
If I can, actually, it does require 8. Required minimum is 8. That's what you're asking. Did you hear that?
I'm sorry. I heard him.
Bullet point 8 on considerations related to traffic safety. It states that the required minimum number of spaces is 8, and the applicant is proposing 12, which with
Perfect.
Commissioner Montgomery's motion, it would require that.
Perfect. That's exactly what I would suggest. Okay, great.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
May I ask a clarifying question? I'm not sure I heard it right, but was that incorporating was the motion incorporating all of the conditions recommended in the staff report?
Yes.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I'd heard it right.
Thank you.
I'll second.
All in favor of the motion?
Were we going to hear anything from public comment?
No. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstained? Sorry, Commissioner.
Oh, I said,
Barber.
no, I'm sorry. I said I voted for the.
Okay, I just didn't hear that. So, okay, motion carries. We have 5 in favor and no against. Okay. Of the motion to approve. Okay, we'll move to consideration or move to item number 2.2. Request for preliminary approval of the Gateway Estates phases 2.2-22 in the F5 forest 5 acres. Director Grover, would you please explain?
Yes, this is another administrative decision. You'll be looking at the land use code, making sure it's meeting the subdivision requirements. On preliminary approval, it's a little different than final approval. You don't have to have as specific requirements at preliminary as you would at final. So there's things that are going to be required at final that wouldn't be required at preliminary, and Tammy will explain those things. And this one, you do not need to take public comment, but you can choose to if you'd like. And Ms. Aydelotte's going to be presenting.
Okay, thank you, Director. This is a request for preliminary approval for Gateway Estates, phases 2-22. This is located off of Highway 39, and it straddles 2 zones, the F5 and the F40 zone. Thankfully, the applicant has divided up the lots, so we don't have any lots that are straddling those zone boundaries. But just a quick summary, they are proposing public and private roads throughout, and I'll show those to you as we move through this presentation. Septic systems are proposed, and we have received a feasibility letter from Weber Morgan Health. And then as far as water goes, the applicant is proposing wells and has received a statement of feasibility from Weber Morgan Health regarding that as well. That is a preliminary approval requirement. This is the proposed preliminary plat. And of course, this becomes a little more refined as we go through the approval process. But what planning is concerned with a preliminary plat, we're concerned with road alignment, where they're located and the size of these roads, as well as the arrangement of the lots. And the size, and we're checking to make sure that they meet the minimum for the zone. For these lots, all of those zones within the F5 zone meet the minimum of 5 acres and 300 feet in width, and all of those remaining lots in the F40 zone meet the minimum acreage and width in the F40 zone as well. Let's see here. These are your standards again, 40 acres and 660 feet of width in the F40 zone. Let me see if I can get a better, no, let me go back here. Can you guys see this okay if I use this? Do you want me to pull up the actual plat? Okay. These are the proposed roadways. So you've got a main road that comes in off of Highway 39. These are the previous phases that were approved administratively, all of which have shared accesses off of 39. But there is a dedicated public right-of-way coming in here off of Highway 39. It is public all the way to here. From here, east and north, it's private, as well as accessing these upper 3 lots here. Applicant is proposing a 50-foot wide private right-of-way here and a 66-foot wide public right-of-way stepping to the westernmost boundary of this subdivision. We have had many discussions with Weber Fire District, with county engineering, as far as what that road cross section should look like, what they want to see as far as public versus private maximum grades. Fire District has been working closely with the applicant to make sure that they have a fire plan in place, which includes not only sprinkling every single home, but also having a dip tank up near the northernmost boundary, and using that to run infrastructure down the hill to the remaining lots for fire suppression purposes. This is located in a geologic hazard study area, and so we have required those reports. We have those on file. And going forward, as they continue to develop this land, we will require that they follow all recommendations outlined in those reports. Something I wanted to make sure I covered, because there has been a concern brought up from the public, which is regarding water and wells. And what do we require at which step in the subdivision process? For preliminary approval, we simply require a feasibility letter. That's per our land use code. Weber Morgan Health Department has issued that feasibility letter. The applicant has provided that as part of their application. Before they can go for final approval, they do have to apply to the state for start cards for all of their proposed wells. I know that the developer is not looking to drill a well for each and every lot. He is looking to try and do shared wells. But he will need to submit all of those water rights, which he has secured the water rights from Weber Basin. We've got those on file as well. So going forward, before he gets final approval, he does have to have start cards from the state. And then prior to recording his subdivision per our land use code, he's got to drill and pump test every one of those wells. He's got to show that he's got sufficient capacity coming out of those for every single lot that those wells will be servicing. That's it as far as our presentation goes. Do you have any questions for staff?
Was this the one we looked at, I think, last year with the steep grades and stuff like that? And that's what they've addressed with these roads, kind of.
Yeah, I think it may have been a couple of years, but yes, yep.
Okay, so it looks like they've addressed it with the roads winding up in there and making some of them private and some of them public.
Right. They have shown plans to not exceed 12%. Now, they will have to continue to submit improvement plans as they're building this road to show that they can keep that to 12% or under. But yes, they do have those and they have shown that.
Okay, thank you.
Along with that, the other concern we had was something to do with UDOT, and that's all been resolved.
I think it was the access off the UDOT roads to the private lots.
I'm
assuming that was, yeah, I was going to say, in order for them to build, they'd have to have those accesses from UDOT before they could have an access off the road.
Right.
But that's all part of the process they'll have to deal with.
They've actually already received those approvals. And in fact, in that first phase, in those first phases along Highway 39, they've even dedicated additional roadway along Highway 39 to the state.
Okay.
I had a question along that line. I'm just remembering when we were discussing Osprey Ranch with the public-private road access, we had required some evacuation routes and break gates. Is that being considered here as well?
At this point, no. Under our substandard and terminal road section in our land use code, I believe once you hit 15, then you've got to come up with some kind of emergency egress. At this point, with their preliminary approval, and they are providing, they have an egress here off of Highway 39, and they are showing an access to the west as well. The applicant, this will be going through final approval, likely one lot at a time, according to the applicant, but we like to secure these things ahead of time. So I appreciate Commissioner Wampler's question. They have provided a second stub out of the subdivision here. If that, does that answer your question?
I didn't see where you pointed, but if you have a second stub, then that would answer it.
Okay, it is the road that goes to the westernmost boundary here, Commissioner.
Okay.
I'm not sure if you can see that.
Yes, I do now.
Okay.
Did I hear you say that every home will have to have fire suppression, no matter how large it is or how small it is?
Correct. Weber Fire District wants every single home, regardless of the size, to have a sprinkler system installed.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve UVG 052523 request for preliminary approval of the Gateway Estates phases 2 through 22, approximately located at 748 East Highway 39, Huntsville, Utah. This approval is based off the findings in the staff report and the recommendations in the staff report.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. I've in the affirmative. Okay, we'll move to item number 2.3, UVV 071123. Commissioner or Director Grover, would you please explain the?
Yeah, this is similar to the last one. You'll be looking at the land use code, making sure it meets the requirements associated in the land use ordinance. And Mr. Burton is going to be presenting this, and this item does not require you to take public comment, but you can if you'd like to. Thank you.
Good evening, Planning Commissioners. This item may be a little bit familiar to you. This was on your agenda in September for a preliminary approval. It's a subdivision called the Village Nests Retreat at Powder Mountain at 5780 North Daybreak Ridge in Eden. They're on, I guess technically Eden. They're on top of Powder Mountain. Preliminary was granted back in September. The reason this has to come before you is because it is a subdivision amendment that is more than 9 lots. If you remember, they were taking these on the left of my screen here. There were these small buildable pads that were originally platted. There were 20 of them, and then on the right is what is being proposed. So it's still 20 dwelling units is what it will be, but those pads go from what they were previously around 1,500 to 3,000 800 to about 1,500 square feet on the left, and then on the right they just the owners want to make those building areas a little bit bigger and actually make them more traditional lots with access there off of that cul-de-sac. And so the lots bump up in size, like I mentioned, from about 800 square feet to around 3,000 or 4,000 square feet. We didn't have to ask the question about water in this case because we're dealing with our 20 already platted lots that have water to them already. And so we know that there's water and sewer that's being provided by Powder Mountain Water and Sewer Improvement District. This step, because after this, if the subdivision does receive a final approval, it will go to the county commissioners for final acceptance and approval. The developer did have to submit plans for this drive that their county engineer has been reviewing. The developer will also have to post a financial guarantee for that road. And the county review agencies have all either approved or granted a conditional approval of this subdivision. And staff is recommending approval of the subdivision because it meets the land use code and the subdivision code. And I'm happy to answer any questions if you have any.
Steve,
thanks.
Okay. No questions. I'll entertain a motion.
I did have a quick question, Steve. So it seems like on these small lots or these subdivisions like this that you require trails and all sorts of stuff going through them when we do them down in the valley? Is that not a requirement up here?
So in this specific area, there is a master plan and development agreement that is a document that acts as it outlines the land use approvals. It also outlines the open space and trails that are to be provided. And in this specific location on the master plan, it doesn't show specific trails. The responsibility of this developer is to provide open space and trails in other locations. And they've, just to give you a little bit of a report, they've done that. I know, I think it was last year or the year before, there were 877 acres that were dedicated. There's an open space easement dedicated on 877 acres on the way up to Powder Mountain with public access and trails and things like that. But looking at what the development agreement requires for trails, there aren't any in this location.
Yeah, thank you.
There's a trailhead about 400 or 500 yards away from this, one of those trail systems, I think.
Do we have a motion?
That UVV 071123 Village Nests Retreat at Powder Mountain be approved as outlined in the staff report.
Can I make a friendly amendment here? Somebody you might want to use as subject to the term
as outlined and subject to text in the staff report.
My understanding is he's saying subject to the findings that are listed and the conditions that are recommended. Okay.
All the writings in the staff.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries 5 affirmative. Okay, we will now move to item number 3, a legislative item, Z 3.1 ZMA 2023-12. Discussion and possible action on request for approval of zoning map amendment for 2.26 acres. Commissioner Grove, please describe.
I'll be okay as a director, not.
I'm sorry.
Esteemed
that. To me, you're at least a commissioner.
So on this one, it's just a legislative item. You'll just be making a recommendation to the county commission. On this, you'll need to have a public hearing. You'll need to open and close that public hearing. I have asked Cortland Erickson, our legal counsel, to just explain some of the process that went on before this so that you're aware of how that happened. And then Mr. Kobe is going to present this from the staff level.
Thank you, commissioners. The request that was made of me was to talk a little bit about the adoption of the street regulating plans that could be used here potentially to rezone this property into the form-based zone. And my understanding is that some people have raised questions as to whether or not that was properly adopted. And I know from communicating with some people that they are making some arguments that it was not properly adopted. So I view my role here as essentially providing you, the Planning Commission, with my advice as to whether or not it would be appropriate for you to consider the form-based zone and the street regulating plan that go along with it to be valid at this point, as opposed to you feeling like you cannot approve a rezone based on the fact or based on the allegation that the ordinance is not even valid right now. And my opinion is that the ordinance as it stands right now, you can consider it to have been validly adopted. I think it is appropriate for you to go whichever way you feel here on the rezone, but to base your decision on the assumption or presumption or my advice that you can choose to rezone it if you choose to do that, because I feel that it was validly adopted. A couple of reasons for that are there was a proposal in October of 2021 to the Planning Commission to make a recommendation regarding a Newtown, I think it was a Newtown Eden village area or something like that. I don't remember the exact wording. That was, the Planning Commission made a recommendation to the County Commission regarding that. The state law says that after the legislative body receives a recommendation from the Planning Commission on an ordinance change, the legislative body may adopt or reject the proposed land use regulation as proposed by the Planning Commission, or after making any revision the legislative body considers appropriate. And so here, the legislative body did revise, perhaps somewhat significantly, I guess that's kind of a subjective question, but they made revisions to what the Planning Commission recommended at that time. And then they adopted it as revised by the county legislative body. In my opinion, that likely was legitimate. That was a valid exercise of their legislative authority. An argument could be made the opposite way, that they changed it too much, that by revising it the way they did, they revised it more than they should have. But I think courts would likely give a lot of deference to what the legislative body did here, which was a zoning change for the Eden area. The legislative body took that, they expanded it, they revised it, they directed staff to do things, or they accepted recommendations from staff one way or another, and they made some changes. I do not view that as likely a big enough change to make it invalid. In addition to that, 2 more times since then, the same code, the form-based code with the accompanying maps, has been in front of the Planning Commission and subsequently the County Commission. So there's an argument that even if the first original adoption of the code was invalid, the code as it stands now has later been brought to the County Commission through the Planning Commission process with a public hearing, recommendation from the Planning Commission, and then it went to the County Commission. So potentially, even if the original was invalid, that might have gotten cured. I would argue it has gotten cured because the Planning Commission has seen it again, made a recommendation through the public hearing process, and then the County Commission took that and adopted what they adopted. And additionally, one final reason why I think it is likely that that ordinance is valid is because there is a 30-day limit, a time limit, essentially a statute of limitations for people to challenge the adoption of a legislative ordinance like this, as long as the county gave proper notice. And from the information I've been provided, I've been told that the county did give proper notice of that public hearing back in October of 2021. And if that was the case, then it is likely that courts would say people only had 30 days after that to challenge it. And I'm not aware of any legal challenge that happened during that 30-day time period. So obviously I'm not a judge. I'm not saying 100% this is guaranteed, but in my opinion, it would be upheld if this were challenged, just meaning the existence of a valid ordinance in the form that it is right now. So that's, I believe, what I was asked to address. I'm happy to answer any questions. Chair, it looked like you had a question. Okay, so that's just advisory thoughts. Again, this has nothing to do with whether or not you actually approve a rezone. That is just my opinion as to the fact that that form-based code right now is a code that is validly adopted.
I have a question, Cortland.
Yes.
Just for a point of clarification, you mentioned one of the reasons being, the last one you mentioned was a 30-day time limit on challenges after it has passed. And the only date I've heard you mention was in October 2021 Ogden Valley Planning Commission meeting that apparently made a recommendation, whether it was affirmative or to deny, I don't know, but whether it made a recommendation. And then from there, the county commissioner, the legislative body, adopted it. Is the 30-day time limit from the planning commission recommendation, or is it from the county commission legislative body adoption?
It is from the county commission legislative adoption, because it's 30, right. The language of the statute says 30 days after the enactment. So the county commission is the one that enacted the land use regulation.
Do we have a date on when that was?
I'm sorry, I did not hear that.
Do we have a date on when the county enacted it?
It was January of 2022, I believe. I don't know what day.
Okay. January of 2022. And I also wanted to ask for a point of clarification when you mentioned that later on, the same map came in front of the planning commission, us, and that we forwarded it on to the legislative body since then, which would kind of really cement its adoption. I'm not familiar of when that was. I came on board in the summer of 22. And ever since I've been on board, it was presented to me as an already adopted map. So I know I didn't ever recommend anything about it because it was not presented as something that was up for recommendation.
The amendments happened in August of 2022 and again in May of 2023.
Yeah, one of those had to do with Nordic. At that time, we included that in with Nordic as well.
And the amendments, if I'm remembering correctly, were all in our work sessions. We never ended up calling a vote on them.
They were.
Is that correct?
In a public hearing.
They were.
If I clarify, I think what you're thinking of is the specific map discussion, but what they're referencing is the entire ordinance was reviewed and for his approval. That was a part of it. So no, we did not review the specific map, but we did review the ordinance.
Okay. Yes, I thought we were talking about the map. Okay.
Okay, sorry, I was unclear on that.
Are we ready? All right. Thank you very much. This is a zoning map amendment request as stated. You can see the area is located approximately here on the star. It's kind of north and east of Newtown and Old Town Eden. The general plan calls for this kind of thing or anticipates this kind of zoning in the portions noted here and in the staff report about the housing affordability and housing choice in the area, as well as the transfer of development rights into areas of the areas denoted by the street regulating plan. Sorry, my brain just... we've been over smart growth development standards. You are all familiar with that, and we are looking at those in connection with this proposed zone change as well. What's being requested is the form-based code, the form-based zone, and this is a part of the street regulating plan that is designated as a rural residential street. And the rural residential street is really looking at 1 acre lots. It's not the village center kind of area. This is an outlying kind of area. And I'll show you on the map here in just a second, right now, where that is. You can see the kind of olive green look and where the site is. The olive green is the streets that are existing and proposed, and then the site there is in the dashed area. The area to the west of this was recently rezoned. It's the Dog and Bone development, and this was rezoned to form-based code as well. So that's something that was in the area. Again, in the same kind of rural residential street layout kind of situation where you'll find 1 acre or more large sized lots. Again, here's the location of that, and here is the current zoning. You can see that again, just across the street to the west, it's already been rezoned to a form-based zone. So again, the consideration with this, large discretion is given to the county to make these kinds of decisions, as opposed to the administrative decisions where discretion is not given. So you should consider these kinds of things. Is this the right time, and is this the right place for this kind of zoning change to take place? And the possible actions are in front of you and outlined in your staff report.
Thank you. Any questions by the planning commissioners before we look at opening the public hearing?
I have a few questions, if I can.
Please.
One was in regard to the map that you showed. This is a kind of just for my own benefit. Why is the four-way stop plus a little bit? Why is this over on the side, on the left-hand side, also shaded red? To me, that was the designation of form-based. Is there something I'm not aware of over there?
Is this map that we're looking at right now?
Yes.
This is from the GeoGizmo. It shows those are different zonings. It's not form-based specifically.
Yeah, I don't know if that has been updated or not, or if it needs to be updated.
This is showing commercial zonings, so it's a different color.
Okay. Sorry, I was seeing the form-based next to the property is red.
Yes, that one has, if you see the little FB, that's form-based. This other one is like, you can see different
okay.
numbers. That's
just not, but it's not related to form-based. Okay.
No.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's CV2, I believe, over there on the far left.
Okay, thank you.
I have a general question regarding getting into rezoning form-based outside of the village centers.
Yeah.
So according to our general plan, the idea and the strategy behind the form-based and the TDRs, if I'm remembering the verbiage correctly, was to transfer density from the valley floor into these 7 designated villages for higher density so that we can create and keep and protect open space. When we start creating form-based and transferring density into rural areas not designated as one of the villages, I'm not sure how that honors the general plan.
Okay, I'm sorry, was there a question there?
Can you explain to me how it honors the general plan?
Yes. So the general plan anticipates village areas, and these areas that are designated by the circles that you'll see on this plan are the, quarter mile, I think that's right, the quarter mile perimeter. And the quarter mile is generally used as a walking distance kind of community, where you can get to all of the amenities and things that you may want within a certain, like a 5 or 10 minute walk. I actually looked at the distance between the property that's being considered tonight and these both the Old Town Eden and the New Town Eden areas, and they're both about a quarter or 3/4 of a mile rather from where this site is located. It's not likely that you're going to walk to get groceries or things like that where you have to carry all of them back to your property if this is where you were living. But if you wanted to get from where you're living down to the park, for example, to the south, 3/4 of a mile isn't a long walk. It's only 6 blocks. It's not a terrible distance to have to go. The idea is, and these village centers were never intended to be prescriptive as to the distance from a certain location. They were intended to be centers around which these population densities and the transferable development rights would accumulate. It was never intended that they would be, you know, they were never intended to be a big wall, and everything outside of that was going to stay rural. What we need is a blend and a transition from higher density to lower density in these rural residential areas. 1 acre size lots is still a very generous size lot. It's something that definitely could be compatible with the overall village feel as you transition from the higher density mixed use type developments that you would see in the village areas, the village center areas rather, into the more rural and open space kinds of areas beyond.
Okay.
Does that make sense? I feel like I've rambled there a little bit.
The blend down makes sense. I know we've discussed that in a few work sessions and things. Yeah. This is a specific example that just happens to be one of the first ones coming forward. But it has awakened a concern in me because whenever we've discussed the form-based, we're usually talking about these villages. We're not usually discussing creating density, you know, outside of that. You know, it's kind of we've created this new zone, and I'm not sure that, you know, can we actually, there's a question, can we confine it to the 7 village areas?
That's certainly a possibility. That would take a revision of our street regulating plan, this is the adopted code street regulating plan in front of you right now. So we would have to change that to remove all of these areas and push them in. Again, that would reduce the blending effect that we're trying to get to with this, where we've got a concentration of uses and mixed uses in the higher density areas, and then transition that into a more blended feel as you get out towards the more open areas of the county.
Commissioner Wampler, if I may, when this came before us in the work session, some of our concerns were along those lines of we're kind of getting on the skirts of this, and how do we, you know, we're looking at this new in the form-based code of how do flag lots, how do roads, how do the colors play in, does the new road create? And so I believe and hope we asked the staff to address that or look at that in future for the form-based code. This application being separate or being more immediate, and that being something that we want to look at as far as flag-based, I don't know that this is the appropriate time to try and set those boundaries, but I know that we have expressed that as a planning commission as something we would like to see to control that concern that you're expressing.
Okay, thank you. And I was just going to follow up because this one is in that on the street regulating. It's like he was like Planner Kobe was saying that it's within the bleed down. I'm asking for a point of clarification that if one came forward that was not at all in the bleed down, I don't remember in the ordinance if it specifies that it needs to stay within the village area, including bleed down.
That is correct. So if there was a property that was not bordered or bounded by one of these streets, they would have to come in with a change to the text of the code itself and amend this plan, the street regulating plan, to include that. And we would have a completely different conversation about that. This property is only in front of you because it abuts and is on one of these streets that's already been designated a rural residential street regulating plan property. And so any of these other areas that are further beyond this, I believe are outside the scope of the current conversation, but definitely outside of the scope of what the code currently anticipates. So
okay. Thank you.
Maybe we can help close this. Are we working, is staff, is that something, is that a direction that the commissioners would like, are okay with us looking at the flag lots and kind of having a plan for how this is not going to sprawl?
Yeah, that's on the docket. It's just, we've had other things ahead of it.
Yeah. So I hope that helps, because I share those same concerns, Commissioner Wampler, and I recognize that this is not that there will be, that will be coming, and this may just bring it up, but it's not really a concern at this time.
Thank you.
Is there any estate lot residential colors on this map? The 3 acres?
I haven't seen any. I think that everything that's beyond this is the 3 acre areas. And so, those would be the sending areas. And so as far as I'm aware, it is what it is. Then everything beyond that is the AV3, just the traditional AV3 zoning areas.
Which it's already currently zoned.
Exactly.
AV3.
Yep.
So with that, yes. I think it's a strong concern. I mean, this lower road goes out on the map. It's a little bit outside. Again, this particular applicant, going back to it being a legislative decision, it may be something to look at in the future. Is
that 3
your
acre
point
lot,
I think your point, and we'll push that again, that this is outside that we talk a lot about quarter acre, right? But yet we're pushing this estate lot all the way about 2 miles just past, at least a mile past the elementary school. So we're really sprawling west, and that, when we helped draw that, but I believe that was added by the county commissioners and not necessarily by this commission. So
I have Bill, as you know, I asked you a few questions the other day.
Yes, sir.
Specifically about this lot. This is a really strange lot.
It is an odd configuration, and the canal doesn't help.
So, and I guess maybe a little clarity. Is that really a canal that water flows through?
As far as I'm aware, yes.
And so that canal can't be spanned, but there is a small 1/4 of an acre on the other side of the canal that counts, but doesn't count because you can't really use it in the construction of a second home.
One of the things that we're going to look at as we move forward with this is a development agreement with the property owner to get some land on the north side of the property for the eventual extension of 2700 North, which kind of goes right into the upper corner, the northwest corner of his property. And so that's something that we're going to work through with the property owner as this proceeds. And that could provide additional frontage, which would keep him from having to do a flag lot situation. But that would also take into account some of the that weird leftover acreage up in the northeast corner of the property. So
I guess I'm struggling right now. Maybe hearing from any comments will help me, or anything you can say. I'm struggling with the timing right now because of what you just said is an unknown. How 2 homes could be laid out on that property. And I'm also struggling with what I heard in the work session originally, whereby the current house couldn't be expanded because there were problems with expanding a septic system, but now they want to put 2 septic systems on the same property. So I struggle with that. In my questions to you, you mentioned looking to a sewer system at some point. Well, that doesn't exist. So in the future, maybe it could exist, but there's no sewer system right there right now. So I'm right now, and I know, legislative item, timing is one of the the considerations you have
Absolutely.
to make. So right now I'm struggling with the timing of this potential approval.
Okay.
Rick, were you Commissioner Director Grover? Were you about to make a comment?
I was just wondering, Bill, if you had that map that you could show them where that road might be going through, even though that would be more at a subdivision level.
Yeah,
it might be helpful for them to see.
Get my computer to respond. So if this is a good way to look at this. So right now the road comes up here. Can you see that all right? See my cursor moving? And then 2700 would come across this way, here along the north property line. We're not exactly clear. We need to have this done at a surveyor kind of level, which is why we're not really pushing it at this exact moment as far as where and how this looks. But you can see that it seems to end right at his northwest corner of his property. And so we would request a half width on his northern property line when it gets to the subdivision level. With regard to the question of the sewer, there are a number of different options ranging from do nothing to very, very expensive options. Engineering, which I'm not an engineer and won't even pretend to be one, but engineering is called the science of the possible. And if you can dream it, an engineer can probably make it happen. The question would be whether or not the health department would sign off on it, what the soils look like up there with regard to different septic systems that would be required or available, whether or not he has enough land even to make a leach field. These are all really good questions, and it could be enough reason to say we're not quite ready for this kind of decision yet. But just know that when it gets to the subdivision, the hurdles are much more exacting and specific. And if the developer or the property owner is not able to figure out a way to make all of these things happen, the answer is no. And until the time when either sewer becomes available on the property, the canal question goes away and he's able to reacquire land or just whatever needs to happen that way, the subdivision process is it's a non-starter. If there are technical reasons to not approve it, that's just a bridge too far.
Thank you. At this level, it is a zoning request to see if it fits the plan.
Correct. Thank you.
And is generally something that we would like that would fit. And public input. So it is a legislative decision, so that there is subject to public opinion, and those more technical questions could be a reason. The question that I had regarded, you mentioned a development agreement, and I recall one of the reasons that we wanted to do the form-based village as a whole was to avoid development agreements.
Yeah.
Can you talk more about why we would be needing to do one in this
specifically
specific one versus saying as a condition of rezoning, dedicate for this potential road?
So first off, I don't really love conditions on legislative items. I think it's not good practice to apply conditions to a rezone or any other legislative item. I think that they should just be an up or down vote. You either think that it can and does, this is the right time and the right place. You can put in stipulations or considerations, but actual conditions should be reserved for administrative items. So if, for example, in the question of the parking at the item we were talking about earlier tonight, if the parking isn't clear, or if you want more clarification on a particular item on an administrative review, I feel like conditions on that kind of approval are
Isn't that what a development agreement is conditions of what you can do based on your development with your rezone?
It's basically a
So
negotiated development between the county and the developer, where the county gets some things and the developer.
Is it fair to say that a development agreement is a condition on a rezone?
That is very fair to say. In this situation, you are correct. With the form-based code, the intent was that those conditions are spelled out in the code. In this situation, probably if we did a development agreement, it would just be dealing with the road, making sure that that connects. But we have those things in the subdivision ordinance with connectivity. So that could be already used in there. So the road would, so the road would really be the big thing if you wanted to do some type of development agreement with this, but really those conditions are spelled out in the form-based code. And that was the intent of the form-based code, is so that we don't have to enter into development agreements, but that may give you the extra security or comfort level that you may need or would like, or maybe you'd feel like it's already there.
My only thought with this is I want to avoid it if we can and get at the point. And is there something we need to do now to do that? And that's why I say that.
I don't know, Bill, but my thought is you probably don't need to, because those things are in the code right now. It's really, if you feel that, this is meeting the street regulating plan and the requirements and the timing's right, I think that's for you to consider at this time.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I make a motion to open the public hearing?
Please do.
Make a motion to open the public.
Do I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Commissioner Wampler. Okay.
I will just note the applicant is here if you have questions.
Great. Please come forward and state your name and address for the record prior to making your comments. Any materials that are displayed or referenced, pictures or written materials, are part of the record and must be left with the commission. Person speaking for a committee or a board will be given 5 minutes. All other individuals will be entitled to 2 minutes. Prior to speaking, anyone who needs more time to present evidence must ask for more time. Thank you. Please come forward.
Thank you. My name's James Bird. I live in Huntsville, and purpose I'm up here is the whole idea behind the form-based, which Commissioner Wampler and all of you have talked about. And as it pertains to this, but I need to go back. I went to the May 16th, 2023 meeting on form-based. It was in conjunction with a question of the Dog and Bone request for a zoning change from, I think, was an AV3 to a form-based zoning. And at that time, I was a little surprised that I was out of the village area. And so I asked. In fact, if you go back, you probably be able to hear my question about the form-based zone being outside the village areas, and was told that form-based zone would be applicable to anywhere in the valley, not just the village areas. Essentially, all parcels could become form-based if desired by the developer, obviously given some limitations. I also asked, couldn't the Dog and Bone get the same thing they're requesting, which is 1 acre plots, by going to FR1 rather than form-based? The answer I got was, well, this allows us, being the county, to have more control over the architecture on the road. But what it didn't answer was, why would the developer be requesting it when he could go simply to an FR1? It's my same question for this lot. Why is this person requesting a form-based if their real story is to just develop 2 lots, 2 1 acre lots? Why not do an FR1? My concern is that with a form-based, first of all, I know all of you have read it. It's 147 pages long, as opposed to the forest residential FR1, which is 4 pages. I can understand that. I can't understand the form-based one. I was just trying to find out, would this 2-acre lot be allowed to have short-term rentals? I think I overheard from your meeting that no, it wouldn't. But I don't see it in there. I do know, well, I don't know because it's 147 pages, that they could do transferable development rights. So in other words, is this a way to get my 2.6 acre lot in a way where I can just transfer the rights over to someone else, maintain the property the way it is. But I still don't understand why both Dog and Bone and this one form-based one, when they could do FR1, which is much simpler to follow. I don't understand why we as a county is allowing something that is what Bill said, 3/4 of a mile. Could you walk 3/4 of a mile? Well, that's an uphill road, by the way. I could walk down it. I'm not sure I'm going to go up it. But what about 1 mile? What about 2 miles? What about 10 miles? You know, there has to be some limit. In the original discussion was 1/4 of a mile. And that is, I think, fair for a decent walk to a village. Let's see if I have any questions about no, just basically, why are these places asking for a form base? They can have short-term rentals, they can have all sorts of other ability to recreation lodges and things like that. An 147-page code is not conducive to someone like me trying to read it and find out whether your neighbor's actually applying the principles. Thank you.
Not seeing any in the audience. Do we have anyone online that would like to make a comment? Marta, would you mind monitoring that for us?
I don't see anything right now.
Okay, any, I guess we'll do a last call and then I'll call for a motion to close. Okay, I'll the motion.
I'll make a motion to close the public hearing.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay. Does the applicant wish to have any rebuttal time? Please.
Hi, thanks for having me. Yeah, so this is our application. It's currently 2 parcels, a 2.26 and a 1/2 acre parcel that we want to have into 2 lots to potentially build. There was a question, and I know a lot of these are for further down the road when we actually proving the lots right now, because it matches the street regulating plan. The E acre subdivision is all 1 acre lots, and that's the street that we're on. And then Dog and Bones also approved for form base, and they're pursuing 1 acre lots as well. We felt like it was consistent with that. Some of the down the road questions about septic and that sort of thing, of course, we'll address, but the fundamental issue was that we just didn't want to pour any money into the original 1968 house due to limited financial means. And rather than doing that, starting anew seemed reasonable and would allow us to hold on to the current house for parents or in-laws to live in, that sort of thing. So the nature of our request, obviously a lot of those details will work out as we're required to do. But right now we just wanted to have this zone change so that we could at least look into if we can meet all those requirements. And we felt like it was reasonable given street regulating plan, all of our immediately adjacent lots that are also 1 acre. And given our, I don't know our exact distance to the city center there with Carlos and Harley's in Eden Park, but my kids walk there all the time. And In fact, they walk every day, double that distance to get to school. So we do feel like we're part of that Eden village. And this is just a continuation off of that. And that's why we're asking. Thanks for your consideration.
Thank you. If the commissioners are commission,
would you state your name for the record? Sorry, I don't know if we got that.
Seth Hurway.
If the commission is all right, even after the public hearing, it looks like there's someone online that has a comment. Are you all right if we hear that? Big comment. I don't think we need to because it's been done, but we can hear it. Looks like White's online.
Yeah, I can't. My chat's disabled, so I can't ask the question for you to pose.
You can go ahead and ask it verbally, I guess.
Yeah. Are you taking questions on everything you've talked about tonight or just this rezoning of this person's 2-acre parcel?
At this time, just this person's rezoning.
All right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay. I'll entertain a motion. Unless there's more discussion, I guess, questions.
I'm uneasy about the timing as well. In the packet, I got the impression that there was no immediate plan to build, that this was just, I don't know, throwing out a rezone, but that if they did intend to build, it would be coming later. But from the applicant's speech tonight, it sounds like they actually do want to go ahead and build a separate home. Which one is true?
I'm sorry?
I'm wondering which is true.
Which part? Sorry, Commissioner. I think we had a hard time hearing you there, or I did at least.
When I read the packet, I got the impression that this was an application for a rezone, but that the applicant had no intention to build anytime soon. And therefore, that was why we didn't have answers to various questions that were being asked, because this was just an initial rezone, and that when they plan to build sometime down the line, if they ever do, that's when we would get answers to those questions. But the applicant spoke tonight, and it sounded like he was interested in actually building a separate home for him to live in soon. So I'm wondering which is true.
You could ask the applicant.
That's what I'm asking. Excuse me, sorry, applicant. I'm not able to see you. So I'm asking the applicant, do you have a plan to transfer a development right and build anytime soon?
If he wants to answer, go ahead, please, Seth. Seth, right?
Yes, Seth. Yeah, Seth Hurway. Yes, we would like to pursue that. But in talking with planning folks and planning departments, we were told that this was the first step, and that the details in terms of our septic and lot access, private shared driveways, etc., would be addressed later down the line. The first step is just whether or not this meets zoning requirements, and that can even be looked into, whether or not the street regulating plan and the general plan would allow for this rezone. So yes, it's our interest and we would look into it immediately. But we've been told, even in the work session, that those specific issues can wait until the rezone is addressed first.
Okay, thank you. And then I have one other question that would be for our planning staff. Based off of the suggestion by Mr. Berg in the public comment section, I'm trying to figure out, because if they did rezone, if they requested an FR1, it would just give them another development right. Is that correct? Rather than having to transfer one in?
That's absolutely correct. And there would be an entitlement associated with that, which would carry forward to any future development. We've been trying, and this conversation and the whole street regulating plan and the form-based code itself is designed to not create any additional density anywhere in the valley. And so the idea is to
keep those rights what they are and not add any additional development rights to any property anywhere in the valley.
Right, which is what I was going to say would be a benefit to going form-based, is that it takes one away from somewhere else rather than creating a new one.
Exactly. He'd have to demonstrate 2 development rights for this property in order to get an additional unit on it.
Thank you.
Commissioner Wampler, it may be just to note that if we did zone this FR1, it could be considered spot zoning because we don't have anything around that. And it would bring in density rights to this that don't exist.
Right. Yes, which is, I just wanted to clarify that there is a benefit to having it be form-based, and that is that it moves one over that already exists but doesn't create a new one.
Yes. So, and I appreciate those comments. There was the one public comment that mentioned the insurity, and I'll try and answer it, but I'm probably not the expert, but as far as I understand it, and the staff would be great to direct those questions to. Why was, as far as I see, why would we apply this zone as compared to others? We've been working on this zone in order to try and reduce the creation of new density rights, and the only way to do that without taking or adding is to try and maintain a certain level, is to try and build a market and enable transfers of development rights from someone who may have no intention of ever developing and wants to sell them and gather that financial and move it to someone who wants to on a smaller lot that fits the plan. And so in order to do that, there's really 2 ways. One is to do the FR1, as was mentioned by the public comment. And if you did that, you would have to do a development agreement, and it would be spot zoning, and you'd have a whole lot of work in order to do that. That would create probably 147 pages of work. And so the intent, I'll say, of this is to create an avenue for developers, and that's why we would use the form-based zone in this occasion, is to create a way for that to happen without creating additional density, which was the case for the Dog and Bone, where they took the density rights from Sunnyfield and transfer them, or at least that was their stated intention, to transfer it there to cover those additional rights. And so that's the goal. Hopefully I didn't butcher that. If there's more questions, please direct the planning staff. They can do it better than I can. Any other discussion?
To just clarify, I continue to have a timing with this for a couple reasons. One of them being that this is a very unique lot in that it's bisected by government property. It's kind of pushed up in the corner there. It's there's another home right there. It's not at all like that Dog and Bone property across the street, which is a 20-some acre blank slate at this point in time. They can do anything they want with respect to those 1 acre lots. In this case, this is really a difficult situation. So I'm challenged by the timing right now. And if this were to go forward at some other point in time with some other, or with more specifics, I might consider otherwise. But right now I'm challenged by, consider this a timing issue.
Commissioner Barber, I will say that before hearing from the applicant, I too was very troubled by the timing because of all the unanswered questions regarding even the feasibility of, creating a second development, which those have not been answered. But when I read the packet and it sounded like the applicant wasn't even pursuing a development right now, that for me was a clincher of, then why don't we just wait on this until he is. But what's changing my mind is that he is interested in pursuing it, and he will not be able to develop if those questions don't get answered. And so given that, the rezone, is within I guess, this agreed upon area, albeit the very far fringe. And so that is leading me back to being a little bit more stable. I don't know if that helps you.
I will call for a motion. There is one.
I'll make a motion. I move that we approve file ZMA 2023-12, the applicant driven rezone, to amend the zoning map on 2.76 acres of the property located at 2690 north, 5600 east, from AV3 to at the form-based zone. I feel like that it supports the general plan and the current street regulating plan.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Is there any discussion on the motion to approve? Okay, I will. Cortland, are we good with the language of the motion?
Yes, as far as I was concerned, there was an explanation of why the motion was made, and I think that's sufficient.
Thank you. There's a motion for approval based on the stack, or motion for a recommendation, forwarding a positive recommendation to the or the county commission based on the staff report. Is all in favor of the motion?
Aye.
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 Aye. All opposed?
Opposed.
Motion carries 4 votes to 1. Okay, we'll move right into public comment for items not on the agenda. Are there any comments for items not on the agenda? Please keep them to about 2 minutes, or if you need more, please let me know.
Hi, commissioners. Thanks for having me. My name is Paul Joyce. I live at 1041 South, 9150 East in Huntsville. Unrelated to the topics of this evening, but always related to the topics of this evening, is water in the valley. It's become a very hot topic, as you guys all know. I personally spent a significant amount of time learning everything I could about water and how water is acquired and distributed, and the difference between a share and a co-op irrigation company versus an actual water right. I spent a significant amount of time with the Planning Commission 2 years ago to rewrite a section of the code, of the land use code 10642, that specifically talks about the requirements of culinary and secondary water of new subdivisions. I did that just out of, I'll say, good nature. I'm at the ends of a 5-year lawsuit with over $150,000 invested in suit with the developer, because I felt the commissioners and the Planning Commission didn't interpret the code as it was intended. So I was part of a task force, if you will, about 2 years ago. A whole bunch of the water stakeholders in the valley, whether they were members of the board or presidents of water companies, met. Charlie did a tremendous job at rewriting the code. And I was there in the room. I was there when I got to ask the questions about what the intent was. Why were we rewriting it in these ways for these reasons? And so I've continued over the last couple of years since the land use code was rewritten to follow these meetings. I get the alerts that I can sign up for, and I read the staff reports, and I continue to see grave mistakes over and over again. When I attended the pre-meeting, I think Commissioner Schuman, you said we can't be experts. We lean on the Planning Commission to be the experts, and they're still getting it wrong. They really are. So I implore you, my ask today is to visit 10642. It'll take 10 minutes of your day to read it, become familiar with it, and do a better job at approving subdivisions based on water required. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments? I believe online Whites. I don't know if this might be the time for your question.
Yes, thank you. When you were speaking about the development happening where the people want to have a year-round resort with 6 sleeping rooms, and Tammy made a comment about that Weber County judges, something about judges the sewer septic on the number of sleeping rooms rather than the number of people in the household, because it's an existing house, blah, blah, blah. What's to change from having 6 sleeping rooms, but 150 guests on a daily basis, utilizing the pickleball, the sledding, the whatever, every day, whether there's 1 sleeping room or 10 sleeping rooms, if there's a bunch of guests there? How is that going to be regulated or monitored for usage for water and septic in that area?
Can you state your name and address, please?
Oh, I'm sorry. This is Trina White, 8826 East 500 South in Huntsville.
Okay. I don't know. Do we want to try and answer the question?
Or you could have her contact Tammy and she could explain those things.
Marta, can we put Tammy's information up for her?
All I'm seeing is a black screen right now, but I could get Tammy's information from your website, I'm sure, if it's listed as a department.
I don't know if we can put it up on the screen and she can write it down or something.
You can do that. I'm also happy to try and address it now. There are a couple of things that a couple of tools that we use to kind of enforce some of this. Part of it is the health department. They are the experts as far as septic capacity and which sections of state code they use to make their requirements regarding sleeping rooms and septic capacity. The other thing is they're required to get a business license, and the business license is very specific in the number of individuals that are allowed to stay, in the size of the parties, the minimum and maximum, as well as the duration. So those are the tools that we use to try and enforce that. If you want some additional information, you're welcome to reach out to me directly, either via email or with my phone. I hope that answers some of your concern.
Yeah, something's kind of popping up, but it's a little bit hard to read. Is your contact information on this map that's scrolling through right now?
I think she's working on it.
Yeah,
Okay.
Marta's working on it, I'm sure.
Let's see.
There's some contact
Tammy,
information.
there. Oh, so it's email only.
I'm going to put her phone number or list it. Maybe she can write it down.
Trina, I can give you my phone number right now if you want it.
Okay.
You ready?
That's great.
801-399-8794.
Okay. We'll
Thank you.
go to remarks from planning commissioners.
Yeah, I have a couple remarks this evening. Over the time I've been on this commission, starting early on, I've identified myself the need that the general plan that gets referred to so often needs to be looked at and updated for a range of reasons. And I keep getting told, no, that's not going to happen. I can tell you that I'm not going to, but I could give you 6 reasons right now. It really should be updated. It's more than 6 years old. One thing I heard, and that I keep hearing, heard it again, I think at the last elected commission's work session, was, well, they don't want to spend the money. Well, this county just spent about $500,000, I'm told, on those signs up in the valley that are, in my opinion, out of proportion and out of sync with the general plan. If you were to ask the people in the valley, would you rather have a more dialed in general plan, not changed, not revised, just dialed in better, updated, taking the new studies on water and sewer and integrating them, looking at some of the unintended consequences, some of the issues that weren't addressed 6 years ago? Or would you rather have two giant signs a few hundred yards from the market, both saying where the market is? The county wasted $500,000. I don't think you're going to find too many folks up in the valley who think that was a good way to go with that amount of taxpayer money, no matter where the money came from. No one's been explicit as to where the money's come from. I just think, you know, again, tonight was discussed the street regulating plan detail, and TRDs were lightly discussed. The reality is the general plan called for TRDs to not come from unbuildable land, yet right now they can. So the next, and no TRD has ever transferred from unrelated parties. That's a fact. The reality is TRDs to achieve the general plan do not all have the same value. A TRD from some obscure corner of the valley that's underwater has no benefit to maintaining the rural nature of the valley. The folks who wrote the general plan knew that, but yet what's been adopted in the code does not reflect that, or what's in practice doesn't reflect that. So I really think, once again, I'm going to say it, and if I'm chastised again by the commission, so what? If you could spend $100,000 or $500,000 on those signs, you can spend some money and put some time and resources into having the general plan be truly functional without a lot of fantasy in it, which is right now. Again, I'm not saying revise it, rewrite it, change it. I'm saying update it and make it better. The other thing I wanted to say is we had the last meeting before this up in the valley, which I had asked for also. Other folks have as well. You know, when I walked into that room, I knew the room was going to be too small. I knew the sound was going to be bad. And if I knew it, the county folks should have known it too. That's just too bad. I think these meetings should be more frequently up in the valley. And I don't think we should have that small room or bad sound be a reason not to. A couple things during the meeting that I think were missed opportunities. The county made a presentation, great, but the presentation didn't cover some of the fundamental issues that are before the people in the community right now. It didn't talk about what a street regulating plan is. It didn't talk about form-based villages and give the people really some of the true definition of what those technical matters are. As it was stated tonight, the code is 100 and some pages long. It's really difficult to understand. That was a great opportunity to explain that to motivated people who came to that room to hear something, but they didn't hear anything like that. That would have really helped pretty much everybody in the valley, I think, to have that. And that was a missed opportunity. I also think it was a missed opportunity to not let people ask questions in the general forum to both get answers, but also to learn what's on the people's minds. 17 minutes was given to the power company guy. He could have said what he wanted to say in 2 minutes. People asked him a lot of questions he didn't have answers for, but that was 17 minutes the community could have had ask questions in the general forum and to get answers. So I'm sorry if I've repeated myself again, but I think these matters are important. I'm on this commission not for no other reason to be an advocate for the community. And I just think sometimes the community's left out of the equation.
Thank you. I have a comment as well. And it's more of a question, and I know it's not really your realm, but I'm remembering that it's been about a month or so. There was some concern about developers and the damage done to the pathways. I recognize that this is the planning, but if you would mind, if you would talk to maybe your colleagues about that, and I believe, I'm not sure if it's engineering that is supposed to kind of monitor that, but if we could get them to repair those as they bring in equipment or change the piping, make it so we can ride the bikes and do the things.
We're working on that. We've been in contact with them, and some has to do with dirt being placed on them. Some has to be with, they need to be repaired or been damaged. Some has to do with fencing. So yeah. Thank you.
Thanks. Okay. Any other comments? We'll go to director's report.
The only thing I wanted to mention is the county commission. I mentioned in the pre-meeting to you gentlemen and to Commissioner Wampler is that the 31st meeting that the county commission is looking at having for the looking at amending the Eden regulation plan, street regulating plan for Eden and for Old Town. That's been changed to December 5th at 5 o'clock. So, and that will be here. So just FYI.
Thank you. That's a county commissioners meeting?
That's a county commission meeting, but I just wanted the public to be aware of that. We've changed it on the state website and a few other, we've contacted a few folks, but we'll get more information out there too. Also, like I mentioned, that does affect your meeting, the work session. So we won't be having that work session meeting that day. We'll be combining it with our regular meeting in December.
That's great. That's very good of them to do it in the evening. That's, I see that that's long day, even longer. So tell them thank you for accommodating them.
And I'll relay your comments to Commissioner Biden. Yeah, and they're open whenever you do reach out to them. They do appreciate that. So you're welcome to, but if you'd like, I'd be glad to relay that as well.
Thank you. Cortland, you're up.
I don't have anything right now. Thanks.
Okay. All right. We'll adjourn to the work session. We want to stay here. We want to go. Okay.
You guys have seen this in your packet. Charlie, you want to look?
This is just
Bill, does Commissioner Wampler have that electronically?
She does. It was in the packet, so
I don't think she got the hard copy just yet.
I'll hold on to a hard copy.
Oh yeah, I have not seen a hard copy. I thought I was missing something though, based on that first purpose paragraph. It says, where is it? You're going to provide two things, and I only saw one thing provided. So let me just look.
Yeah, the two things are there's a couple of code sections that we're looking at, and then the second thing is the street trees list.
I saw the street tree list,
Okay.
but I think I was confused on what was the current verbiage, and then separately what you were planning to change it to.
Yeah. So the current verbiage is actually in the memo, and it's one sentence long.
Oh.
And it's section 106.42.080 under street trees. And it just says that the planning commission gets to decide where trees go. And as much as we love and respect you guys, we felt like, and the county commission felt like, having a little more guidance for developers and development in the county is beneficial for everyone. So that's why we're looking at these different code sections as well as the street trees list. In lieu of going over this chapter and verse for you right now, I think it would, if you were willing to have a homework assignment, to just take this home and look at it and provide any comments back to us if you have them. We're trying to look at everything from street tree maintenance and location, and as well as the street tree species list that's included in this packet, within the idea towards helping development happen in a uniform and logical way. So The trees that have been selected were influenced by other communities and what they have found to be beneficial and useful. And you can see their species names and how big they are and in which locations they work best for overall height, including under utility lines, but also in narrow park strips where hopefully we'll avoid some of the sidewalk heaving and other concrete issues that we've seen. So,
do you know if all these trees are in the right zone for the upper Ogden Valley?
So they may or may not be, because we're adopting this list for the whole county. Some of them will work better up there and some of them won't. And we have a provision that if there's a particular brand of maple, for example, that you're interested in, and it's not on the list, you would just review that with the planning department and we would take that under consideration. So there's kind of a relief valve. This is just a basic list of suggestions.
Does this list of suggestions
reference, could you tell me where in the valley, like, was the last time there was a requirement?
A tree requirement?
Like where this would be applicable? When did something like this?
When was the last time we had street trees required in the valley?
I'm going to need someone to repeat whatever he said.
The form-based village has trees.
Yeah, as those street regulating plans get developed out and as we see those actual streets start to take shape, this will definitely come into play then too.
So this because we have the form-based village or code that calls for street trees.
Mm-hmm.
Is this so because we've got it's so big, right?
Right.
Is this going to be a part of that? We're just subject to as well.
When subdivision of land takes place, this will come into play at that time, as well as the development of the streets and in the village centers. But anywhere that there's a subdivision of land that involves street trees, this will come into play.
I don't think I have ever had to do street tree placement.
In denser cities, it's a really big deal.
Well, because it used to be planning commission. We've never had to do it.
No, we've never had to do it that I can recall.
And a lot of the times in a lot of the subdivisions, the street improvements, except for the width of pavement, have been waived. So until those do go into effect, we do not look at putting street trees in because we have the gutter and the sidewalk to protect the street trees. And if we don't have that, we're not going to be requiring the street trees.
Yeah. So in the case of like Mr. Hwy, when he develops his 1 or 2 lots, instead of putting in a half width of road, we'll have him do a fee in lieu. And then the street trees will be put in when the street goes in. That makes sense.
Okay.
So I didn't see anything in here one way or the other about irrigation.
It is, let's see. Didn't we have something about it?
There isn't our current.
Basically, we're thinking private requirement, then you have a tank of requirement
Secondary water.
Big issue is keeping them irrigated.
Yeah.
That one's more of an experimental basis. So we're waiting to see how that works.
I guess.
So I guess that you are going to require irrigation.
Yeah, and it says, it doesn't say irrigation specifically, and we may want to put that in there. I think that's a good point, but under item C on this third page there, it talks about replacement of dead trees. So if you have dead trees, you got to replace them, and then you got to keep them alive. Otherwise, that's going to be an expensive replacement. So
who's responsible for that in a public
road? The property owner, the adjacent property owner.
I have a question about that when it comes to the A section about illegal to cut the trees. In the form-based code, we talked about how that adjacent property owner is responsible for tending to and, you know, keeping up. I was under the impression it would be like mow the grass and water the plants and do that kind of thing. But here it says it's unlawful for them to, you know, cut.
It's a great point. So we just talked about how it's their responsibility to keep water alive. They also trim them, remove them.
In most cities, they have a park district and they're responsible for maintaining those, because if just a regular Joe Blow goes in and starts pruning a tree, it could damage or kill the tree. So, you know, as you move into that phase down the road, when you do become a municipality, a park district or something like that should be the ones that look at maintaining that, as opposed to just the regular adjacent citizen doing pruning on those type of trees. So this is kind of looking down the road, but at the same time, you know, if we did have, you know, we do have a park district, but not one that actually maintains the park strips. So
I would just ask that you look back at the language in the form-based ordinance, because I have it in my head that they had to maintain it. And so if you have bushes or trees that are encroaching on the walkway and stuff like that, wouldn't that be considered part of maintaining?
Yes, that's actually addressed in item B, just below that. So item A, it makes it illegal to cut down the trees just willy-nilly without a permit. But item B talks about the maintenance of and pruning of the trees as necessary. So.
Okay.
That's what I was going to say, add that, but you did.
Oh, yeah,
we got you.
Yeah, that works.
One of the other questions I had was, in that very long, extensive list of trees to choose from, did this take into account the various water conservation discussions that the state and the various departments have been having of late?
Yes.
So most of these trees, if not all of them,
they're considered water-wise or beneficial like that.
Thank you.
So we're going to bring this back to you. We'll address the question of irrigation and try to pin that down exactly. But in the meantime, if you would please look it over, and if there's anything that you see that's glaring, please let me know, and we will get that revised, and then we'll hold a public hearing in the next little bit and get this into the code.
Thank you.
Thanks.
With that, we'll adjourn.
Thank you, everybody.